Right. Good morning, everybody. I am going to get started because we have restricted the time that we have this morning to 45 minutes, and I know that people have a full day's work ahead of them. Please feel free to put your cameras on if you want to. Again, as we move through the presentation this morning, if you have any questions, please put them in the chat. I'll be monitoring the chat box as we move through. If you'd like to put your Twitter handles in the chat box also, that would be welcome. This is a very short briefing this morning. Last year, we hit upon a very difficult period where the essential lockdown was something we had never experienced before. And what we found very early on was that many areas of education were being catered for, but there was very little information coming out for NQTs and for trainee teachers. And it wasn't for a period of time down along the way that the gap in that area started to be filled. One of the things that we did as a group, and that is Fig Tree International, working alongside our guest this morning, who is Lizana, was to put on a webinar which basically did some of the background work for you, looking at the standards and applying that, and really just giving some context to what we feel, one, the government are saying about the lack of teaching practice time and exposure to face-to-face, physical face-to-face, but also to provide some reassurance for you moving forward that clearly what is happening right now is not of your making, but it does not mean that your year this year is going to be deemed as a failure, and as you move into your NQT year, or if you're in your NQT year at the moment, that is going to be looked at in a detrimental way. So without further ado, we've got about 4 or 5 areas to cover this morning. I'm going to pass straight over to Lizana.
Hello, good morning, everyone. Thank you, Anne. I will just share my slides quickly, just to make sure you can see that. Thank you again, Anne, for the invitation to talk to colleagues. I will just give you a bit of background in terms of my background, just to, by introduction, it's always just good to know where the person is coming from. I'm a senior lecturer at the University of East London, but before then I was a teacher for over 20 years, and I've also been a founder and director of a SCEET, and also a founding trustee of NASBET. And in addition to that, then also program led the School Direct course and also the apprenticeship course as a starting point, and also coordinate and oversee a lot of MA courses. In addition to that, I'm also the BERA convener for teacher education. If you want to know a bit more about BERA, do let me know. Happy to tell you more about that. And also then USAID, I'm the vice chair of the CPD forum for USAID, and work closely with James Noble Rogers on all things teacher education. So really lovely to speak to you this morning. And one of my other roles is also to be external examiner for teacher training courses. So I do talk a lot to universities and SCEETs about their concerns, advice, and also practices and ways they might want to need to move forward to help you and support you. So I'm very happy to answer any questions. Now, the thing is, as Anne said, in the summer, we had a similar session. And one thing that struck me about Anne's message to colleagues was you have to know your entitlement. And so again, where do you find information? I've included the .gov.uk website for you. Really important just to go back to that every now and again and just check where we are, what the current advice is. I've just checked this morning again what the situation is, and the advice remains the same, similar to November 2020. So not much of a movement on that, other than in the following things that I think is really important. So in the ITT criteria, so teacher training courses have to be compliant to a set of rules. They are called the ITT criteria. they have made the following allowances. So that means that if there are discrepancies or changes or variations in terms of your training, then of course they will stipulate that, and that means you can still pass the course. So that's really what Anne means by we are reassuring you, and it's really important to pick up on that. So first of all, then I'm going to look at the teacher training courses, ITT, and then secondly I'll look at the NQT entitlement as well. So the ITT criteria highlights that there's a replacement in terms of the 120 days in schools. So it's now been replaced with the following line. It needs to be sufficient time in school to demonstrate that the teacher standards are met. So it's really important that you are clear it's sufficient time, and whatever that might mean, you need to think, am I recording? Am I reflecting? Am I showing that I'm meeting the teacher standards? And I'll share some ideas with you a little bit later. So think about sufficient time. And then also what's been added is remote observations and moderation section. So in the ITT criteria, you can now also be observed remotely. It does not have to be a tutor coming in face to face. And that could take many different forms. We've been talking about that. I've talked to a university I work with as well. Students upload clips of where they teach micro lessons to small groups. They've uploaded examples of where they work on a specific task or a specific activity with learners to demonstrate that they are showing that they're meeting teacher standard 5, for example, which is meeting students' needs. So it's thinking creatively around these things, and of course also moderation. As an external examiner, I have seen a plethora of things, like for example, reflective tasks. I've also seen mini vivas that's been held where teachers, well, now teachers who are qualified at the time talked through how they are meeting the teacher standards. There are different ways to then demonstrate that you're doing all sorts of things to meet the standards. So I think it's a case of talking through with colleagues how you are doing this. And I think it's really key to stay calm and really reflect on what am I already doing that is showing a wide range of skills, and how are they linked to the teacher standards as well. Now the guidance also highlights that trainees not recommended for QTS in 2019, there's a window for them. That courses can actually be extended beyond the planned end date. And that's, I'm sure, because this is a moving feast. And as you can see, the Department for Education is sensitive and mindful of that. And you also have on side organisations like NASBED, Million Plus, as well as you said, fighting your corner in relation to then when things do look different, what needs to happen. So the DfE is in constant consultation with those organisations. So it's really important for you just to keep checking what's your entitlement. So at the moment, courses are encouraged to move the provision beyond the extended end date, if that's appropriate, where people are not meeting the standards, they don't show a trajectory that they are meeting it. And also then it gives these trainees an opportunity to show that they meet the standards. So we need to think about how to support you. That's really key. And it is also your responsibility to determine the content. So the provider needs to think about the content and also advise you on that so that you are able to meet the standards. Now, that doesn't mean you need to just sit and not be proactive. Book those meetings with your tutors, meet with them online, have those conversations, talk to your mentors. Some of the case studies we've been doing, I've done some research on the impact of COVID-19 on efficacy for teacher trainees as well as NQTs. And the people who are coping the best are the ones who think creatively, are working with their groups, and also are thinking with their tutors on ways forward. So talk regularly with your mentor and your tutor as well. So it's really key, and find out what the changes are. There is also funding available to support this extension. So do have those conversations too. So in terms of changes regarding the ITT criteria, like I've explained at the beginning, they look as follows. So again, it's about having enough time in school to demonstrate that you can achieve all the teacher standards. And they're also flexible with that. There's a perspective that we understand now that some of you will be teaching online with your mentor. So whatever that might mean and how it's defined is, do you have enough opportunities to be able to demonstrate those skills, and how are you meeting the standards? The second bullet point is, again, with the time they need training in schools to demonstrate the teacher standards. So again, there's that allowance of the 120 days and the amount of time, so that is flexible, because we know that you can't always be in school. So there must be other ways to do that. That's really key. And also then, providers are expected to have plans in place to introduce an extended provision. So that needs to look like, whatever that needs to look like. It could be online training, it could be additional tasks, it could be, again, you doing micro teaching sessions with your groups, developing schemes of work. There is a lot of possible tasks and activities you can engage with to show that you're meeting the teacher standards. So do have regular conversations to enable you to make sure that you are able to progress and move on. And also, a lot of trainees, the research I've done demonstrated where people are becoming quite negative and isolated and don't reach out, that's when things don't move forward. So the more you communicate, the more you're involved with your group, the more you will flourish. So really keep going. And Anne and I are here as well. We've given you our Twitter handles. If you have questions, feel free to ask us. The last point then, it is the organisation's professional judgment and discretion to determine how they want to extend and how they want to support you. So do have a think what that means for you, and do have those communications with your provider. Now, in terms of placements, I know that PGCE students perhaps have a bit less flexibility, because we have to talk to schools about whether they are able to support you. And many of my schools, when I talk to them, are probably very happy to have someone working alongside them online at this stage. So it's thinking about creatively placing people and alternative ways of placements as well. In addition, then, as you can see, the criteria also changed in terms of critical workers. So ITT trainees are included in the definition of a critical worker, but not their mentors or tutors. So that is why there's a variation in how we observe, how we support you, how we meet with you, because we can't go into your schools. So in many cases, students are still able to go to schools, but where schools have indicated they can't do that, we will need to think of alternative ways to do that. And again, there's some flexibility there. So if you're in that position, do have those conversations with your school, your mentor and your tutor as well, and look at how you can really start shaping your journey. In terms of remote observations, again, clear guidance. Providers need to agree that with schools, it needs to be done safely in respect to school policy, and also then consistent with the partnership agreements with schools, and also meet the safeguarding needs. So it needs to align with things like, for example, the Data Protection Act and also GDPR agreements, and also consent from parents. Sometimes parents might have objections. There might be reasons why children can't be observed. So again, some of the students we work with had to make alternative arrangements, so the camera needed to be moved right up to where they are, and it's just them being observed and no children can be watched. We will have to find alternative ways and think carefully about that. Yes, of course, there's the element of having to show at some point that you work well with children, but there are different ways of recording it. So you are not just working with your university tutor, you're also working with your mentor, you're working with a whole team in your school, and they too can make lovely observations and notes for you on how you do that. So, and if you work online with children and teaching online, your classroom teacher can help you with that as well. So key considerations then for you to think about in terms of questions to ask. How can you continue to develop your unique skill set? And I want to really emphasize, when I did my teacher training, it shows you how old I am, I had to learn how to teach with a blackboard and white chalk. Your skill set is far more extensive than that. You have to now also navigate a variety of softwares. You have to teach online. These are really unique skill sets, and also things that you can map to the teacher standards, like, for example, how do you plan for these lessons? So teacher standard 4, how do you need to think about your pedagogy, and how do you need to think about your subject knowledge? How does that break down? And also, how do you feed back online, for example? That's entirely different and requires a different skill set. So think about that and think about how you can map that across, because that is also something that makes you a lot more employable, and unique skill sets that you can sell to employers and show them what you're worth and show them what you can do. And also then the next question to think about is, how can you be more creative and proactive in continuing to meet the teacher standards? So can you work in groups? Can you create schemes of work and delegate that, each one of you creating a scheme of work, then pass it on to someone else to add tasks like SEND differentiated tasks, SEND specific question differentiation? Can you think about EAL tasks that you can add to that and then map that across? So there's loads that you can do creatively. You could also do little micro teaching sessions and peer reviews, and also record those notes, reflect on how you can refine your practice. So think how you can move that on. And then also, how can you continue to extend your subject knowledge? Again, it's not the end of the world if you can't always be in front of a class. You can read, you can do online courses, extended courses if you feel that that would help. You can also ask for extensive reading list, or you can work with a subject specific colleague to work on your planning. So think how you can reach out and be proactive, and how can you work with others to continue to grow as a future teacher. You could possibly also work with teaching assistant, have a conversation with them and think, how would they want to be more involved with online learning, for example? How can you think about the planning for that, and how could that work into the lesson and the plans you're currently working on? So in terms of meeting the standards, I made a big long list for you that you can think of, and these would all be really useful things to put in place. And these are things I've seen through then my external examining role, looking at last year's candidates when they had to work through the summer lockdown, and they had to start becoming really inventive and creative in terms of how they do things. And also, don't forget that you have a lot more flexibility. So now you could also possibly think about how can you observe more experienced colleagues. You can navigate quickly through your different Teams pages, or through the Zoom links, or Google Hangouts, whichever one you use, and you can arrange to meet colleagues. I can just see there's a chat popping up. Let me just quickly see. I think that Anne said she will pass on the PowerPoint. Yes, of course, no problem at all. But loads of things that you can do, and what you then need to think really carefully about is, how do I map that to then my teacher standards? And very often people do all these things, but then don't think, oh my goodness, this is actually me meeting this consistently. This is what I'm doing. And again, like I said, you can plan assessment tasks, you can write model responses, you can assess those, you can annotate them. They're brilliant examples to use when you teach people a certain skill, especially children. They like seeing a weaker response and a really great response, and then they can improve that. But also it shows that you are applying the mark schemes, you're understanding assessment, you're thinking what it should look like, and it really helps shape your learning. So have a think about all these things. And of course, building up to employment, and I'm sure Anne will mention that as well, you can also include things like, for example, examples of how you mark, how you assess, how do you feedback online, how do you feedback immediately, how do you do it long term, and also then pieces of work, annotate that, show how you apply, take it to your mentor, get your mentor to moderate it for you, have conversations on how you can improve. So have a think how these things can work for you. It's always important to be creative, and you'll soon find that you are hitting your stride and you're feeling more confident about what you're doing. In terms of behavior management, we had some interesting conversations with some of our students regarding that, and they find that keeping children engaged online is a lot more challenging. So again, that's an example of you thinking how to engage a child, have high expectations, teach a standard one, and also then thinking about using questions, getting them their attention back, smaller tasks, keeping the pace up. So again, think how that could work for you as well. Okay, now next step then, thinking about NQTs, because we have a mixture of colleagues in the room. And of course, you as a trainee will move into your NQT year. So again, know your entitlement. This is the link to the NQT guidance. When I was NQT many moons ago, I worked through that and made sure I understood what I needed to engage with and also follow up on. It's important that you know as well as the people helping you. I used to be an induction tutor in a school as well, and when I meet my NQTs for the first time, I would make sure I go through what the entitlements are. That doesn't always happen. It's ideal if it does, but make sure you know where to find the information so that you can help yourself as well. So again, what's lovely is the DfE recognises that due to COVID-19, there were variations in training, but, and that's why I highlighted this in the second bullet point, they also recognise that you have a unique skill set, and that makes you very, very appropriate and applicable for your roles that you have. And they are encouraging schools to also then think how to support you and your specific needs. So that's really important. It's been acknowledged by the DfE. So schools need to pay attention to that, and they need to appropriately support you in that way. And then they also highlight that due to the time of the coronavirus outbreak, your training was obviously much shorter or quite unique. And they also highlight that your training was very different, and what was good about that. And it's also based on specific research that highlight that you were able to teach remotely, and also then that you had, some of you had additional time to deepen your subject knowledge, and also might require additional time now as an NQT. And of course, in some areas, we have the early careers framework kicking in as a pilot. So there was also additional funding, additional support, and that's also available. So do ask and do have a look. And they're also recognizing that people are at different levels and at different stages, depending on what has happened to them. So it's a national acknowledgement, and schools need to respond to that and be responding to your needs appropriately as well. So in terms of support entitlements, that's really an important page to pick up on. It's also on the DfE website, but it's really important that you have a designated induction tutor, and that person needs to hold QTS. So induction tutors need to hold QTS. It's ideal that everyone working with you holds QTS. Of course, it's not all your support colleagues, but the colleagues who advise you on your teaching development and teacher development, that's really important. NQTs usually have a reduced timetable, which is 10% additional reducted time. However, this year, it's also been acknowledged that you might have even more time off, depending on capacity in your school. Okay, I'm just checking the chat, but I can see it's Anne talking to colleagues there. Sorry, I'll go back to that. Go back to the slide. So make sure you check your timetable, that you have sufficient time to grow and develop still. If you have had many gaps, it's really important to have these conversations. That does not mean that you're not doing a good job. It just means you need to develop more. Again, you're entitled to observations. Now, the entitlement, if you look at the IGT criteria, is usually once a week. That could vary depending on the circumstances, but you do, as a teacher trainee, have an entitlement of 1 mentor meeting a week. So make sure that happens too. If there are issues, let your tutor know. Now, with an NQT, They also talk about regular reviews, regular meetings and observations. Now, normally, observations are not as frequent as it would be in ITT programs. For my group that I always used to have, it would be a formal observation once every half term, but we could, if there's developmental support observations, it could be more frequent with your agreement. And also then mentor meetings tended to happen every 2 weeks rather than every week, but it depends. If that person needs more support, we will up that if that's what the person needs and wants. So again, make sure you communicate your needs very clearly. Again, I would say make sure that you are communicating with your induction teacher and mentor. Agree when things are best, agree timetables, when meetings should happen, and also meet with those people regularly and have those conversations. Talk about your teaching often. And also what they highlight is make sure you observe teachers in their classroom settings so that you can also still grow and develop. One of the things I love about my job is that I can watch people teach. And that's one of the biggest privileges, I feel, because you get wonderful ideas, you learn how to express yourself, learn how to see things in a different way sometimes, and just see brilliant practice. So make use of the opportunity. If you're remote and you can navigate, you can do it probably much easier than you can do when you're in a school with timetables that's a bit more inflexible. So make sure that you do that. And also then your continuous professional development. Now, if you're in a teaching school, it might be a full program for you as NQTs, so do ask for those. If you are in a local authority, they would be your appropriate body, and they would have a formalised CPD outline. So ask them for that. Ask for your entitlement. What's your school doing to support you, and what's also available broadly and more widely. And also make sure that you work with parents and carers to develop those skills as well, and then also work with more experienced colleagues. So this is what they are encouraging. So that's stated and also presented to you. And this is also the more formal entitlements that they highlight to the schools. And again, they're very clear that the induction teacher needs to have QTS. So very important to make sure you check that. And again, also, you need to have time and experience. That person needs to have time and experience to work with you. So if they're finding it really difficult, you will need to raise it that it is a requirement that they need to work with you and have the time available, and that reduced timetables are in place so that that can happen. So again, very similar to what we've just talked about, and the reduced timetable normally for NQT. So remember, in most cases, teachers teach a 90% timetable. So on top of that, you also have a 10% additional reduced timetable. So that means your timetable needs to reflect that 80% timetable. So do go and check that to make sure that you are able to teach appropriately and have enough time to grow and develop as well, and watch lessons and do things. In addition to that, they also highlight that if possible, try to facilitate the early engagement. Some of you might now have moved to different roles. Some of you haven't, but some of these things might not be in place yet for you. So do go and have a look at what could potentially be handed to your induction tutor if possible. So sometimes provision I work with, we create a document called the transition point. That's a document that goes to the schools. Some universities and some providers have a report that they hand to the provider, the appropriate body, as well as the school, with your permission, of course, because it's your data. And then in addition to that, if you can, hand over your final reports so that people know what your starting point is. Other things to ask for is, of course, the school's mission and vision and ethos statements. Where can you find that? Charts of colleagues and biographies, points of contact, policies and processes. Normally, an induction teacher will provide you with this, but sometimes they might be new in post. So know what to ask for. I used to give my colleagues, and I can share that with Anne, a checklist and say, go to your school, ask them for the following things, make sure you check that off, and also make sure you check that you've been registered as an NQT. That's really important because sometimes people don't know they have to register you as an NQT, so do ask for that. You can ask for things like safeguarding documentation, schemes of work, map of the school, that's always useful. Know where the resources officer it would be as well. And one other question to ask usually, and it's not on the list, is what's the photocopier code and where to find it. And also social distancing, how would that work? Risk assessment and so COVID procedures, really key. And then also details of support available for you. So do ask that if you haven't quite got that yet. And then again, coming back to the reduced timetable, again, that's on the DfE website, very clearly stipulated that in some cases, we can actually be even more flexible than the 10% additional time that you can get. If you do have capacity, depending on your needs and circumstances, you can also be in a position where you can ask for up to 20, or you can be given up to 25% off on your timetable. It is subject to the school's discretion. It is also subject to then the capacity in the school to support you. So that could vary. Then the next bullet point, an initial reduction with a gradual increase could also happen. And that could happen over time. It can be negotiated. And then, of course, team teaching is also great. So work with others. And again, when you work online, you can again do similar things. So that's always a useful thing to do. So again, reducing NQT timetables, some schools may be able to provide further flexibility, but again, it depends on the school's situation. They could also give you flexibility in terms of duties. They can reduce those as well. If you need more time to deepen your knowledge, just know that you can refer back to the DfE website and just, I think one of the things that's really important is how you ask for these things, and just say to people that you would like to focus on a particular task, a particular thing that you want to develop because that's new to you. And can you have a bit more extra time, and might they be able to just reduce it and relax things for you for this term? Because it's a recommendation made by the DfE that something like that could potentially happen. It's always how you state that, and it's always how you present that to people. Now we know with COVID and working online that workloads often increase. So again, the DfE gives really clear guidance on workload management for NQTs. And I would argue that the same needs to apply for teacher trainees, because very often online and screen time is far more intense. And if, as a seasoned professional, I sometimes find I need to build in breaks. I need to build in, really specific things to make sure I am looking after myself. You have to look after yourself to be able to look after everyone else. And the DfE also provides you with a workload reduction toolkit. So thinking about how feedback can work, how you can be really specific with your feedback, and how it can, for example, be most helpful. So I normally, when I work with NQTs, I know by December they'll be really low and really, really tired. So we do have conversations sort of October, November, really, in terms of how they feel and how can we reduce workload and how can we work smarter with what they do. And then again, if we think about the patterns of development and graphs of the research that's been done by Sarah Butt, for example, it's really interesting to see that there's another dip around about March, April. So again, think about pacing yourself, workload, how do you feed things back, by when do you take things in, and have those conversations with your mentors as well. Being tired and being a human being is not a failure. It's important to communicate that that's where you are, so that people can work with you and help you. If you want more advice or guidance or support, I know Anne does a brilliant job, and I'm also happy to help. And again, similar considerations. So how can you continue to develop? I think that having online opportunities like today, for example, is brilliant, and it really gives you flexibility. And I've mentioned a few resources and things that you can look at. Again, think about creative, proactive ways to work together. How, as an NQT group, can you plan for certain things as a group? How can you share ideas? Is there maybe a shared folder where you can share things like assessment ideas, creative teaching ideas? I used to have a G drive where my NQTs would put all their ideas together for assessment, for planning, all sorts. So how can you work together collaboratively? That's always a very good approach. And also you can talk about these things when you go for your new next job, because that shows that you have, you know, an ability to work well with a team and an ability to think creatively around things. And then the third bullet point, again, how can you continue to deepen your and extend your subject knowledge? I've spoken to quite a few NQTs who have joined subject specific groups on Twitter. They've also created their own network groups of partnership schools where they share ideas and where they also talk to experts and invite them to talk to them. And I would also encourage you to think about the subject associations. There are many. There are associations for primary. There's also associations for literacy specifically, for PE, English, all sorts. So do have a look. Just type in subject association for and then your subject, and that will pop up on Google, and you'll see that's brilliant. It really helps to have a like-minded group of people to talk to about your subject. And I only discovered those things after I was an NQT, and I wish I'd known then. And so the last one is also, how can you work with others to continue to grow? I would, at this point, also talk to colleagues about their experience, expertise in my school, and also observe across subjects sometimes. Don't just stick with what you're good at. And also phases if you're in primary, or different year groups, just to get more ideas. And sometimes in primary, it's really good to observe the age group just below and just above to see what the transitions need to be like and what you're working towards, and also where the starting points are for children as well. So those are all really good things to do. Now, organizations that you might want to join as well that would do brilliant CPD would be the Chartered College of Teaching. They do have a whole CPD page for early careers teachers and lots of good advice. And for initial teacher trainees, they also have got Sam Twistleton's little booklet and guidance. And you can also, if I remember correctly, you can join for free if you're a teacher trainee, and a very reduced fee for NQTs. I went to sort of say it's £1.88 per month, something like that. But you can go to the Chartered College of Teaching's website and have a little look there, and they do brilliant courses as well, and a lot of free CPD in the evenings that suits us all really well. And I've attended those and took copious notes. You never stop learning when you're a teacher. And you can also join Womenit if you're interested, and Womenit's for everyone, it's not just for women. We have lots of male colleagues joining and learning with us. BAMED, brilliant organisation in terms of very specific guidance and advice for colleagues on COVID, mentoring and coaching opportunities. So do have a look at that. ResearchAid at the moment has got programs running, and they're often free. And then of course Anne, Victory International, who is doing a sterling job with supporting NQTs as well. And she's also doing some work on helping ITTs and NQTs with roles and applying for jobs. So do have a look. There's also a couple of books if you're interested in reading some more. Surviving and Thriving in a secondary school, the NQT's Essential Companion. Loads of really useful chapters in there. And the other book is Secondary Behaviour Management. And I know they're all secondary, but another organisation to look at as a publisher is Critical Publishing, actually. I have so many books on my bookshelf from them for primary NQTs, and Critical Publishing is brilliant. Also, they have a couple of books by Professor Jonathan Glazard on well-being and mental health, as well as then How to Be a Superhero. It is his book on developing as a teacher trainee in primary, with wonderful ideas and wonderful schemes of work in that as well. These are only a few things that you can look at, but I am sure, no doubt, that if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer those. And also, if you have questions, you can direct message me on Twitter, or you can email me, and I'm happy to direct you to the appropriate people to help you as well. Fantastic. Well, thank you for listening. And if you have any questions, and if you want to add anything to what I've said today, feel free to do so.
Lizana, that was just fantastic. As somebody who, again, has been around for a very long time, um, can I just say this is the best information that you are going to find. I cannot stress that enough. There is nobody that I know in my long career and profession that is going to give you such quality information. You'll be pleased to know that, number one, providing the recording has gone well, then I will try and upload that onto my YouTube channel, and I will send out that link to you. Secondly, the slides, providing we have permission there, I will forward that to you. I'm sure some of you have been taking notes this morning, but you know, there's a lot of information there to take in, and we really do appreciate that. Just some things that I want to say very briefly. Yes, this is about reassurance, because both Lizana and I would agree that when we were training, we didn't see necessarily the bigger picture. We just saw, you know, the moment that we were in. And for you, likewise, you've got to remember that this year is a small part of your long-term journey. And whatever is happening around you, please don't be put off by the turbulence, as I would put it, because there's turbulence here for everybody, from heads right through to people that are training. But what I would always bring it back to is, number one, why you chose to become a teacher in the first place, and number two, who are we serving? And at the moment, when we're training and NQTs, we're thinking a lot about ourselves and our own needs, which is absolutely essential. But when we move to the end of the equation, we are serving the lovely children, students that make us smile every day. And we can never, ever forget that. Just to say very briefly, this is only the start of a process. There's so much support out there. Very briefly about my program. My program's got a lot of webinars on it, from how you work with parents to what the role of governors are. We do one particular webinar at the end of the year, assuming everybody's got a job. And we do hope everybody's got a job, where we say, okay, when you're moving into a school, these are the things that you need to do in June, July. These are the things that you need to do across the holiday to make sure that you're in the right place when you step foot into your new school in September. So that's one of the webinars that I would absolutely say is essential that you come to if you're coming to the end of your training year. The other one really that I want to mention, and I'm just going to quickly share the screen if I can find it. There we go. Can we see that? Is Lizana has mentioned certain things around for filling in your gaps in knowledge between now and the end of your year. What we want to do, because we know now is the crucial part for people to start thinking about job applications. Myself and I call him Mr. NQT. He does have a proper name actually, but I like calling him Mr. NQT. He services thousands of trainees and NQTs and has done for several years on Twitter. So he and myself will be hosting this webinar in 2 weeks' time, giving you the absolute essential information that you are going to need around what to do next. His will be the sort of questions that always come up. And my aspect will be, for those of you that don't know, I've been the head of 4 different schools, both primary, 3 secondaries and a primary. And I am going to really key in on, if I were interviewing a trainee or an NQT with a disrupted training process, what would I be looking for? What kind of questions would I be asking them to make sure that they are the right fit for my school? So I would come to it from a very practical angle, and give you some real good hints about how you can stand out from the crowd and secure your posts very quickly. And I will say that everybody, one, that did my course last year got jobs very quickly. But 2, my commitment is not just, you know, about what do you know, it's about making sure that you're journey into the profession is absolutely seamless. Right, just looking if I've forgotten anything. Let me stop sharing. Um, Stop share rather than you share. Okay, it's 1:45. I don't know how much time Lizana has at the moment, but if you would like to stay on for, say, another 5 or 10 minutes just to ask a question or a particular question, then please feel free to do so. I'll also obviously stay on, but for those of you that need to go on and get your day started, please do. But if you want to stay on, Lizana, do you have some time? Maybe
Yes,
sort of 5,
I'm
10
happy
minutes?
to stay.
Okay, so 5, 10 minutes. If you've got a particular question that you want to ask, please do feel free to put your camera on, put your microphone on, and we'll see how many we can get through. But thank you so much for coming today. And as I said, once I get all these bits sorted, PowerPoint and so forth, I will send that out to you as soon as possible. Right, any questions?